Hi, everyone. This is Megan.
And this is Steven.
And this is the Synchrony Podcast, where we talk about transforming apostolic dating culture and ending loneliness in the church.
And tonight, also finances.
And tonight, finances, because it all goes together.
That's right.
It's a big combo thing.
That's right. It is a more vital part of a relationship and marriage than a lot of people give it credit.
100%.
And a lot of people going into relationships assume a lot of information about what people know about finances, which could also lead to issues.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited about this topic.
Tonight for us.
Yeah, I'm excited about this topic. This is near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah, this is kind of the us teaching / coordinating together.
Yeah.
And early in our marriage.
Financial stability is one of our shared values.
Very much so.
That's something that we centered on early on in our relationship.
Says the beekeeper and the matchmaker.
Right. Yeah. We're really the one with a religious studies degree. There's a certain
finances.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, it goes to show you that you can have, not that our finances are like, we're not raking in the millions anywhere.
No, by no means.
We're not even raking in the thousands sometimes.
Yeah.
We're just scoot them into a pile. But we've been financially healthy enough to support the life that we need and to keep our family safe and comfortable. And in an economy where that is increasingly difficult for a lot of people. And some of that is privilege and the blessings of God. And some of that has been the stuff that we've learned by sharing that value.
Yep, absolutely.
So we're going to talk about that. We're not here to teach finances. I don't think this isn't going to be a deep dive on like how to do your finances. There are much, much better resources out there than this for that.
Yeah.
And we can reference the ones that we really like. But I think it's important for us to talk about how finances can make or break a relationship.
Yeah. I think it's important because
we're not bantering at all tonight. We're just getting right into it.
No, not at all.
You can tell we're riled up about it.
Yeah. It's that last shot of coffee I also took.
Yeah, Steven was like, all the stereotypes you see of like frat boys in college, it was like that, but it was with a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I was like, get this into my bloodstream.
Like if you could have injected it via IV,
possibly could have.
You would have.
I think this is big because, well, for us, we usually are like, hey guys, consider the things that we're talking about because we think that you need to reevaluate your expectations. And usually we're asking people to like consider taking away things, right?
Yeah, lower the bar a little bit.
Yeah, tonight is one of those things where like, well, add this to your list because it is so valuable and it is so valuable to us and also stats support it too.
Yeah. Before we get into all the nitty-gritty of why we feel the way we do about debt, I want to point to the elephant in the room, which is that we've gotten pushback and some critique about our position on debt as it relates to matchmaking.
Yep.
So if you don't work with us, if we're not your matchmakers yet, and you haven't done the Synchrony process, come in for a consultation, you might not know, but one of our requirements, like if you go to sign up for a consultation at the link in the description, you'll get taken to a shopping cart that has the pricing and everything. And then it has a long list of criteria.
Yep.
That we ask everyone to meet. And those criteria include things like must be baptized in Jesus' name, must be 21 years or older, or must be seeking a relationship with someone of the opposite sex. Like it lists all the criteria for the people that we serve. And one of those criteria is that you must not have consumer debt, non-mortgage debt in excess of your annual salary.
Without a plan.
Yeah. And we nuance it a little bit one-on-one, but what it says on the website is like, you need to have if you do have excess debt, you need to have a regimented payoff plan that you're working through. And people,
we've gotten a little bit of pushback of like, why does that matter in this process?
People have gotten real spicy about it.
Yeah.
And I want to acknowledge that in this day and age, it is very difficult to be an independent adult and not carry some debt.
Yep.
The economy is not getting any easier. for young Americans who do not already have real estate
Yep.
that they own. A lot of us don't. If they went through college and accrued any kind of student loan debt, that's a challenge, right? Um, there's lots of reasons why. And if anyone here hears what I'm about to say and gets all like, um, accuses us of being whiny millennials, there is good data to suggest that it is much harder to go to college and buy a home and hold down a job to manage that amount of debt today as an adult than it was 40, 50 years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Um, yeah.
And
So,
well, what's funny, never mind, that'd be a side tangent. I was going to say that our generation and a little bit of before us really came from parents that said, you need to go to college because that's the only way you're going to get a job.
absolutely.
Even if that meant you have no idea what you want to do. So let's go to college and just blow a bunch of money
Yeah.
and either don't finish a degree or get a degree in something that isn't relevant for you for what you're going to end up doing in the future.
Yeah. College became a rite of passage,
Yeah.
I think, for the generation right before us and then our generation, where it was just expected as part of the process of becoming an adult that you would go to college.
Yeah.
And people, use that as an opportunity to go explore new things and sometimes go to out of state schools, sometimes really stretch their horizons. Nothing wrong with that. But the cost of college has increased
Oh,
exponentially.
yeah. It's massive.
It's insane. So I do want to acknowledge to the people that have seen that criteria that we have and are frustrated by it. Our goal there is not to try to create some sort of like moral superiority about debt,
Yeah.
right? We're not saying that people who carry debt are bad people.
Absolutely not.
We're certainly not saying that people who carry a lot of debt aren't uh, good apostolics or good
Yeah.
Christians, right? But we do believe that debt is a very, very significant relationship liability.
Yes, absolutely.
And so we exercise caution around that on behalf of the people that we work with.
Yeah.
So that's we're gonna talk about why we think it's a liability.
Yep.
But that's kind of the motivation behind that. You think that was pretty fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Before we get into the thick of the why, I want to talk a little bit about our background with debt. And we don't have to go into like
Yeah.
our whole, family history, but I want people to understand why we're so passionate about this.
Yeah.
You first.
So I come from a background where my mom and my dad both didn't go to college.
Mhm.
My mom and dad actually technically both didn't they didn't graduate high school. My dad in the senior year broke his leg and was like, well, I'm not going to finish this.
He was
And-
like, I can't play on the sports team, so we're
well,
done.
no, he missed some exams and
Mm.
they held him back. And he's like, I'm not doing this again. He ended up going back and getting his GED later, but he ended up becoming a very successful entrepreneur.
Mhm.
He worked for a couple companies. And after working for those companies, he says, I can do this myself. And he and a buddy got together and created a business that ended up being very successful. And so my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family have always had entrepreneurs in the family.
Mhm.
And I believe very few, if any of them, had degrees. So I come from a very different background as from you and your side of the family, which isn't a bad thing or a good thing. It's just different upbringings.
Yeah.
And my sister, and transitioning to me being about a teenager, my dad passed away already at this point. My sister is a CPA,
Mm-hmm.
and she has always been big on finances and understanding money. But she felt like it was her responsibility to teach me because my dad wasn't there to teach me.
And I don't want to go into detail here, but after your dad died and after his long illness, the financial circumstances of your family shifted dramatically.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have as much money within a couple years after my dad died. And so it kind of shifted. My sister said, I want to teach my brother how to be like financially responsible.
Hmm.
And just because you're a CPA doesn't mean you're good at money, by the way.
No, but Stephanie is she's not just a CPA. She is incredibly talented when it
Yeah.
comes to financial management. And
Yeah.
she's also what, 13 years older than you.
Yeah.
So she
Yeah.
had a lot of sway.
Yeah. For a long time, like, and Stephanie, if you ever listen to this, I'm sorry, but for a long time when I was young, my sisters were so much older than me that they almost felt like extended cousins for a while
Hmm.
until I became like an older teenager slash adult and I can have like real conversations with them that I could understand and be on their level. And then they're like, oh, they're real people.
Yeah.
And so, Stephanie happened to come across the Total Money Makeover at some
Mhm.
point, and she's like, this is good stuff. It makes sense. She ran the numbers. She's like, this guy's right. And Stephanie never believes anything at surface level. She has to do the research herself.
Yeah. For context, for those of you who haven't heard it, the Total Money Makeover is kind of like the main educational text written by a guy named Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
He's a big financial health and debt freedom mind, I guess, or personality. That's kind of been his, not just his stance, but his business
Yeah.
for years. And he's developed, you've heard us mention it before, Financial Peace University, a lot of other resources to help people get out of debt and to
Yeah.
build financial security.
Yeah. And we'll caveat a couple things later. But so she found his principles and they made sense. And she
Mhm.
goes, I want to instill this in my brother. And so for a long time, she was like trying to make sure I didn't go into an exorbitant amount of debt. I was just I was like 18, 19, 20. She's like, I know you're getting targeted by credit card companies.
Mhm.
Like, and Dave is like very against credit cards, but my sister's like, get one credit card and like just use it for gas. And
Right.
that's it. And then so my sister's like, but don't use it for anything else or I'll kill you.
Right. So she was giving you a framework for how to
Yeah.
manage your money at a young age.
Yeah. And she's like, live on less than you make
Mhm.
and all those other things. And like, luckily I became an adult and was fortunate enough to have someone coaching me to where I never got into crazy amounts of debt.
Yeah.
So but that's always been a priority of mine. I'm like, I ran the numbers. I read the numbers. They made sense. And it's just something I've always lived by.
Yeah.
So what about you?
So, I grew up in a family that, according to how I perceived it, did really well financially.
Mhm.
Like we always had what we needed. I felt like we did, I never suffered for anything. Like my parents went out of their way to provide me with every opportunity they could for music lessons and travel and all kinds of things that were really just a blessing and a privilege when I was growing up.
Yeah.
So I didn't really, I won't say that I really had an awareness of money when I was young, except that it was math, which I was intimidated by, and it was complicated, right, and a little bit scary. And I went to college. I graduated. I was kind of one of those people that didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. Hilarious, hilariously, there's an irony here. When I went to college, I originally wanted to become a marriage and family counselor.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So, but I knew at that point, like I wanted to stay in state. I knew enough about money that I was hesitant to go spend a lot of it on college.
Yeah.
Right. And around the time that I went to college, I signed my first student loan. And I remember someone in my family telling me, well, it's safe debt because of the low interest rate, right? It's not a bad debt to have. And so I was like, well, okay. And I just remember signing my life away on the student loan for my first year of college and
But
just
not having any idea of what that really meant.
no, seeing the numbers and being worried about them. And not long after that, my mom and I went out to lunch one day and she let me know about this was at the beginning of the recession, right? Like I graduated in 2010. So I guess partway through the
I was
recession.
like, that's not the beginning.
No. My parents had been hit relatively hard because they had some real estate that a house basically that we had moved out of that they hadn't been able to sell when the bubble burst. And so it was a time of immense financial strain for them. And my mom took me aside and basically said, here's here's the challenge that we're up against. And my parents were in a really difficult place. My mom was an educator, right? My dad was a public servant in the local government. Like, neither of them was making a crazy salary at the time, and they had this debt that was weighing them down, and they were in a place that I think a lot of Americans were in at that time. But it terrified me as a college student. I just signed away my life on this debt, right?
Yeah.
And my mom was telling me like, hey, this is a really serious problem and we're going to have to make some huge changes and we're going to have to be really careful. And I felt like, the floor was pulled out from under me a little bit. Not that that was her intention, but I started to panic of like, how am I going to keep myself safe? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going back to your childhood of like being scared of like tornadoes and earthquakes and
I'm an
stuff.
anxious person.
Yeah,
right?
so like all of a sudden now this is a new bubble and you're
Right. I don't want to claim that label of like I'm an anxious Rex, but like I
No,
am someone who tends to go to the worst case scenario,
Yeah.
right? So my little pessimist heart was like, "Oh no."
Yeah.
And amazingly, for my graduation gift, my Bible quizzing coach, shout out to RJ and Melinda if you're out
RJ.
there, a married couple that inspired me. I
Yeah.
love them. So they had gifted me with a copy of the Total Money Makeover as a graduation present. So I'd graduated from high school. I had this book on my shelf, sitting on my shelf at college. I hadn't read it.
Yeah,
I got
as a coaster.
Yeah, well, it was, it was a nice book, so it was on my shelf. I got back to school. I pulled it off the shelf. I read it in a weekend. And I was like, okay, here's a plan.
Yeah.
And it, again, like it's very commonsensical. So it like,
And he even says it's nothing. It's not rocket science that he's
Right.
teaching. It's something that your grandma should have taught you.
right. So it's down to earth.
Sorry, not your grandma. The example of a grandma.
Yes.
The proverbial grandma.
The proverbial grandma. So yeah, like I latched onto it because it felt like a clear plan and it gave me guidance, and
Yeah.
it was something I could kind of get a hold of. So I already had my first student loan in college when I read the book, and I just decided I will never have any more student loans. So I got a job that semester. I had scholarship money, thank God. I was grateful for that. But there was still a good chunk of my tuition that wasn't covered. So I got a job so I could save up the money and cover that each semester. And I worked my way through college the rest of the time, which is also a privilege. The fact that I had gone to a small state school was really beneficial at that
Yeah.
point.
Go Owls.
Go
Who?
Owls. The Fighting Owls. I went to
Is
Florida.
it Burrowing Owls?
Yes, I went to Florida Atlantic University. The mascot is the Florida burrowing owl, which if you would take a moment to Google a photo of, are these teeny tiny little cute owls with big eyes and very spindly legs that bury themselves in the ground. And I went to the
Peak intimidation.
Yeah. And I went to the honors college
Yeah.
of this school, which was they took all the nerds and they put us on an entirely separate campus, 45 minutes away from the main campus, so we couldn't contaminate the regular
It's
population.
basically like a leprosy colony.
It was, yeah. Like they were playing like football and basketball, and we were playing Quidditch and D&D and,
sure.
like ultimate frisbee. But it was a great school. I have very fond memories of it. I'm very glad I went there because otherwise
Yeah.
I wouldn't have ever gotten to know you. Go Owls. But anyway, so
Sorry.
so I don't think we ever hooted at each other. That
No,
wasn't
I,
a thing.
I always say who? Like
I'm just saying it. We not anyway. So yeah. So that's why you and I, when we met, we connected on that. Like
Yeah.
that was a shared value of ours that we wanted to be financially healthy. We wanted to pay off debt. And when I graduated, even though I had never taken out more debt, I still had a good sized student loan at the end because it was
Yeah.
an unsubsidized loan and it accrued interest the entire time I was in college.
yeah.
So I still had a little pet loan that we needed to pay off when we got married.
I'm smiling like this because if you stay till the end, I don't want to tangent on this.
Mhm.
I will tell you a great story about what not to do as a husband in your first year of marriage.
I don't know what this is about.
It's okay. We'll say it at the end.
Okay, I'll try to remind you. So, yeah, so I graduated from college, went to grad school. I was very fortunate to have a fellowship, so I didn't have to take out loans for grad school. So when we got married, you came into the marriage with no debt.
Yeah.
I was grateful for that. I had that student loan from my undergrad degree and a car loan.
Yeah, and the rest of your car loan. Yeah.
Yeah, my grandfather had helped me buy a car and he had covered like half of it and I was paying off the other half.
Yeah.
So not a lot of debt, all things considered. And it still took us the first
What, 2 or 3 years?
2 or 3 years of
Yeah.
our marriage to pay all of that off
Yeah.
while we were working and trying to make.
We were both going to college for the first part. Or no, you were
No,
done.
I was
I
done.
was going to college.
Hmm.
I, no, I had FAFSA. Never mind.
Yeah, you didn't.
Yeah.
You were covered. You had a Pell Grant.
Yeah, but rent in West Palm was expensive, and,
Yeah,
and we moved to Fort Myers eventually, which is also expensive.
yeah.
So it's just like, and also we was in transition of building a business. So
Yeah, so that was our story, and we were very fortunate to get out of most of, pretty much all of our debt early on.
yeah,
The reason why we are so passionate about this topic is because couples who go into their marriages with a significant amount of debt are highly likely to experience relational friction because of that debt.
yeah, especially if you do not have a way of communicating about it.
Right. So imagine that you're the typical, I'm going to use the term like typical American here, right? Because in this day and age, most Americans carry a car debt,
Yeah,
right? Most Americans carry some credit card debt. Most Americans that are young adults carry some student loan debt,
yeah.
right? You can go look up the average of all those different things.
Right now, the national average for a car loan is something like $875 a month.
That is insane,
It blew my mind.
right?
It was like,
That's how much our rent was when we first
yeah,
first
I'm
moved
like,
into our
holy
apartment,
smoke. And that's one car.
right?
Some households have two leased car, or not leased, some leased finance cars.
Right. So it's really common for people, for young adults especially, who have gone to college,
Yeah,
they've bought a car. Most of that is going to be financed, right? So let's just say that you and your spouse carry, but each of you carries an average of $50,000 in debt across. I'm just doing big numbers to make it easy,
yeah. I was
right?
gonna say that's really big, but
It's
sure.
not that big if you consider that that's a student
Yeah,
loan, a
that's
car
true.
loan, and some credit cards,
Yeah,
right?
that's fair.
So let's say both of you have some of those things and it averages out to be about $50,000 in debt for both of you.
Yeah,
You get married, you're now carrying $100,000 in debt together. That's non-mortgage debt. Let's say you
yeah,
buy a house in the current economy.
yeah.
So you
So let's
buy,
say modestly a $300,000 mortgage. I feel like that's pretty modest these days, depending on where you live.
depending on where you live, right? I mean, we live
Well,
in
we can say
Florida.
okay, 250.
Yeah, sure. So now altogether, between your $250,000 mortgage and your $100,000 of non-consumer or consumer debt, rather, you carry $350,000 of debt, right?
Yeah,
That you have to pay on. Most of that debt is accruing interest
yeah,
at a nice clip,
yep,
right? Especially the credit cards, especially the mortgage,
yep.
because interest rates aren't great right now. So,
Well, especially the credit cards.
yeah. So you've got this debt. All of that together means you're probably paying, here, hold on. I'm going to do a quick math. I'll cut this out so you don't have to watch me do it. Okay. So I just Googled this really quickly. So
Yeah,
check my math if you want to. But depending on the type of loan you have, the interest rates, whatever,
yeah.
the average monthly principal and interest payment on a $350,000 loan could range from $1,757 a month to $2,337 a month.
This is a mortgage.
This is just the loan entirely.
Oh,
This
okay.
would be probably a mortgage, but I'm just doing a big debt number, right?
Sure.
So let's just say you're paying, we'll kind of cut it in the middle. Let's say you're paying $2,000 a month
Yep.
in just debt payment,
Yeah, mortgage, car, credit card,
student
whatever,
loans,
student loan.
right? You guys are having to pay that. Now, depending on what you're making these days, right? With the economy as it is, that might be basically eating through one of your
Yeah,
paychecks, right?
yeah.
You
That's
have
not including food, utilities.
childcare,
Yeah, childcare. That's not including taking care of your gas or oil changes,
right?
tires.
And so as the economy goes through its ebbs and flows, as we're seeing right now, right, and as we've been seeing for the last few years, especially since the pandemic, it is much more difficult to ride those ebbs and flows and maintain a balance when so much of your income has to go to debt,
Yeah.
right? As soon as it comes in, it goes right back out, which means that if there's any problem with your house, which you now own, so you're responsible for it.
Yeah. Water heater goes out.
Hmm.
That's $1,200. Dishwasher,
Yeah.
dryer, dishwasher. Dishwasher you can live without, but still, like,
A medical bill and
yeah,
anything that's interruptive and unexpected
yeah,
that comes into your life that's significantly expensive
yeah,
derails you. And that's going to go on a credit card or some portion of it will, or it'll go on a
yeah. And
payment
some people,
plan.
oh, I have an emergency credit card. That emergency credit card probably has 24% interest.
Sure.
Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
So this is something that my sister really helped me understand at a young age, which I'm really grateful for, is trying to calculate risk.
Yes.
Because what a lot of people say is, oh, I can afford a $600 car payment.
Yeah.
I make $2,000 a month or $2,400 a month.
Hmm.
Like, $600 isn't that much. That's, a quarter of your paycheck, but still, like, I can afford that.
Hmm.
Well, what happens if you lose your job? What happens
Yeah.
if you break a leg and now you don't have the ability to work a job from home?
Hmm.
What happens, if you have a family member get sick and you just stop doing your work for a little while to help them? Like,
Right.
yes, in the moment, technically you can afford it, but if life changes at all during the lifespan of you owing that money, which, let's be honest, life is going to change
Hmm.
between the next 7 years of that car payment or whatever the um finance agreement is.
Yeah.
um Life's going to change, stuff's going to happen, and you might not be able to own that.
Right.
Well,
So,
what happens? Well, the thing is like, that's big.
yeah.
Calculating risk is something that needs to be taken into account every time you're considering taking on debt.
And I want to try to avoid just giving a bunch of financial advice here because I don't want people to get so stuck on it, right?
Yeah,
They're not coming for financial advice. And if you're here and it's starting to kind of like make you itchy and break out in hives, like we won't harp for long, right?
yeah,
The point is, debt is not just a measurement of how much money you owe.
yeah,
It's a measurement of how much risk you carry, right?
yeah,
The more debt you have, the less resilient you are to face the challenges that are going to come with everyday life.
yeah.
And marriage, we've talked about the financial struggles that singles have, and those are very, very real.
Oh, for sure.
Marriage does not erase those because you are coupling yourself to someone who has their own financial challenges, right?
Sure. You have two cars that need maintenance. You have two bodies that need to go to the doctor.
Right. And there are some benefits, right? Like
Oh, sure.
there's some tax benefits. There are some it's certainly nice to have two incomes to try to work
Yeah,
with,
absolutely.
right? But realistically, most of your financial challenges are not going to go away when you get married. You're
Yeah,
just going to have someone to help you deal with them.
yeah,
And while we're here, just put a pin in this advice. When you get married, all the money is shared, right?
should be.
That's what I'm saying. Like people who get married and they're like, well, I'll keep my little checking and savings and
Yeah,
I'll keep mine. That doesn't really end well, right? You're combining lives, combining finances, combining households. Managing your money separately usually doesn't go over great either.
yeah. Let me give more clarity to that, because you said it in a way as if everyone understood where you were coming from, and
Mm,
we're a lot more versed in hearing this. We've listened to a lot of podcasts about it, so it's something that we're familiar with.
yeah.
But there are many households that they will get married, and a lot of this has to do with, sometimes they might get married and have a previous spouse.
Sure.
And well, I'm saying there might be a previous, and they might have children that have logistical issues with, like, maybe trust and stuff like that. I can see that being different. But if you are coming into a marriage and you don't have anything holding you back from combining your resources, um, there are marriages out there that have completely separate lives, but they live in the same household.
In terms of where their money is stored,
Yes.
separate bank
Yes, separate bank
accounts, separate
accounts.
credit
Yep.
cards.
And
We don't advise that.
we don't advise that, because the the goal of marriage is transparency and unity and trust and love and connection. And I feel like that if I were to come into a marriage and say, no, I want my own bank account,
Right.
to me, that is saying, I don't trust you enough to handle my money or our money, right?
Right.
And realistically, when you get married, the money should be ours now. And it shouldn't be about, oh, you make 70% of our income and I make 30. So that
Sure.
means I own 30% of our money. It's not how
No,
it works.
we're all contributing to the same household. We're supporting the marriage and the family that we've created together.
Yeah.
So we pool our resources, right? And the reason why I think this is an important call out is because the end result of going into a marriage where you have debt or going into a marriage where you don't have unified finances and a unified financial plan, right, is setting you up for failure in your marriage. We were looking up some stats before this.
Yeah.
And I think it said somewhere between 20 and 40% of divorces cite financial problems as a key reason for divorce, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah. 20 to 40% is also a big range. I want to acknowledge that. But there's a bunch of different studies that have talked about it. And really, this is just like people, they're surveying people about their opinions, right? Or they're
Yeah.
looking at the reasons cited for divorce and they're interpreting it. But
Yeah.
20 to 40%, even on the low end, is a significant number
Yeah.
of marriages that are ending and pointing to financial stress as a key factor.
Yeah.
There was also some research done where they asked people if they would consider their partner racking up excessive debt to be justification for divorce. And something like 54%
54%. Yeah.
said that they would.
Yeah.
So money, money is amoral, right?
Yeah.
But just like you can tell if your floor is level by whether or not water runs off of it.
Yeah.
You can tell if your life is stable by how your money moves through it, right? How firm your foundation is in your marriage and in your life, because money it's a litmus test, right?
Yeah.
The reason why the Bible is so insistent on tithing and honoring God with our finances is because we know that to put too much trust in money or to put too much focus on it or to become selfish around it is poisonous,
Yeah.
right? Money in marriage is it has the potential to really diminish trust
Yeah.
if it is misused.
Yeah.
If money isn't something that you can talk about freely in your relationship, you're setting yourself up for failure. And the reason why debt can cause problems with that is that debt can cause people to carry shame.
Yeah.
It is a vulnerability. It is a liability.
Yeah.
And so it can feel like a source of shame, a source of, something that you want to keep sort of behind the scenes in your relationship. And it can't be that if you want your relationship to be successful.
Yeah. Well, and we're not even talking about the long-term ramifications of like choosing to ignore
Mm-hmm.
debt, right? If you ignore debt, it doesn't go away. It's not like it's not like if you have a check engine light come on in your car and all of a sudden your check engine light goes away. The problem didn't fix itself, you know?
As much as I try to
Yeah.
believe that it does.
Yeah, unless it's your
Yeah.
gas cap was loose and that's what made it go off, then that maybe, sure, but
PSA, go get your car serviced.
yeah, exactly. Having copious amounts of debt
Mm-hmm.
adds a level of weight into your marriage.
Yeah.
And marriage should be something that you feel free to communicate about. And having that weight and feeling like you need to hide stuff, or if you have a separate bank account, or if you have one partner that comes in with a massive amount of debt, if you are not on completely the same wavelength, if you do not have a good form of communication, a way to the same language to talk about money,
Yeah.
I can see micro doses of resentment building up,
Mm-hmm.
and that could be dangerous for your relationship.
So basically, I mean, I don't think it's just that debt changes the emotional landscape of your marriage.
No.
I think it's also that it just makes it harder to do life with your partner and creates more opportunities for resentment and for stress to build up and be used against each other, right?
Yeah.
We tend to lash out at the people closest to us when we are feeling scared or feeling vulnerable, and money problems create that opportunity.
Yeah. And I feel like that lashing out is exacerbated when some sort of secondary tragedy shows up.
What do you mean by secondary tragedy?
So what I mean is like, so I think that having a large amount of debt
Mm-hmm.
in your household that you are kind of on the same wavelength about, right? And you're starting to work on it and you're trying to whittle it down, or maybe you're not, and your engine in your car blows up, right? Or something happens and one of you loses your job.
Yeah.
Now you're in a pressure test in your marriage.
Yeah.
Where that risk that maybe was or was not calculated is now saying, hey, this is where we're having to work together here to make this work. And I think that's when if there was any resentment build up,
Yeah.
that's when you'd be at risk for your relationship being really stressed.
Yeah.
And so that's why we just really, really, really encourage people to be on the same wavelength about money.
The other thing, though, so that's kind of like the immediate impact of debt,
Yeah.
right? The other thing we want to call out, and this goes back to what I was saying before about why we put up a boundary around how much debt people can have to work with us as matchmakers, right?
Yeah.
There's a long-term impact to debt that people don't always think about when they're choosing a spouse.
Yep.
So, debt not only sort of diminishes your opportunities in the present,
Mm-hmm.
it also creates an opportunity cost, right?
Yeah.
An opportunity cost, if you haven't heard that term, is like, if you have 2 birthday parties on Saturday at 10 a.m. and one is for Mary and one is for Johnny, right? You have to pick which birthday party you're going to go to because you can't exist in 2 places at once. If you choose to go to Mary's party, then the opportunity cost is you can't go to Johnny's party.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If you choose to go to Johnny's party, you're not going to get to go to Mary's party. So the opportunity cost is the cost of what you miss out on because of the consequences of a choice.
Yep.
Right. When you carry debt, what that means is you're deferring your ability to build wealth.
Yeah.
So
And we're not talking about wealth as in like millionaires or maybe one day, but like
we're talking about wealth as security.
yes, as is in a trajectory of stability.
Right. So remember, just again, to contextualize it, if you are in your 30s and 40s, the chances are you are living a life and you have the liability to carry more debt than your parents and grandparents did at the same age,
Yeah.
right? Because of how much it cost you to go to college, how much it costs you to have a car, et cetera, et cetera. So your potential to have debt is higher. The potential for more debt, you carry the potential to carry more debt than your predecessors did. Simultaneously, the longer you maintain that debt, then the longer it will be before you can put a significant amount of your income toward savings.
Yeah.
So the way that you build wealth generationally, if you go look at the statistics of how normal people who don't inherit a bunch of money get wealthy, most of them do that by spending less than they make and putting a significant amount of their income toward savings.
Yep.
And that savings builds up over time. Compound interest is your friend, right?
Paying off your mortgage as fast as possible.
Right. Getting out of debt as quickly as possible so that you can maximize the savings that you put into investments, that you put into things with appreciating value, like real estate.
Yeah.
The longer you carry significant debt, going back to that couple that we talked about that has $350,000 in debt, right? They're living from paycheck to paycheck. Once they have 2 kids that are both in daycare, they got no wiggle room.
Nothing.
If they make decent salaries, they're scraping by, right? And they're probably getting into a little bit more debt as they go because, again, if their water heater goes out or their car gets totaled, they're adding on to that as they go. So this couple that's scraping by, paying off this $350, maybe, by the time they get into their mid 40s, it's now $40,000 and it's, or $400,000, it's growing, right?
Yeah.
This amount of debt that they're working to maintain. That means that even if their salary is going up a little bit incrementally, it might not be keeping up with the cost of living. Raises nowadays certainly aren't.
Yeah.
It might not be keeping up with the interest that they're appreciating with their debt. So they are not setting aside enough money into their retirement accounts. They're not purchasing more real estate investment opportunities. They're not putting money into appreciating assets early on in life in the way that our grandparents were, right?
Yeah.
So by the time they get into their 50s and 60s, they might have a very, very small amount of savings. And that means you're going to work a long time. I don't know if you're listening to this and you're like, well, what about Social Security? Can't bet on that these days.
No.
And it's not enough to live off
No,
of.
Social Security is something like a third of what you were originally making, which is not enough to live off of.
Right. Especially again, as you age, you need more in medical care. You need more in medications, right?
Yeah.
You have to sometimes purchase, your own insurance depending on your medical scenarios when you're out after
Yeah, secondary insurance.
right. So there's all kinds of additional expenses that come with age. And if you're a person who has not been able to set aside savings in your younger years, that is much harder to achieve.
Yeah.
We don't live in a country where you can rely on government at that phase of life to sustain your quality of life.
Yep.
And so it is significantly harder to live comfortably in the latter chapter of your life. And if you didn't start off in a place where you were able to start to accrue those savings.
Yeah.
And debt is the major blocker to that. That means that if you marry someone and both of you are carrying tons of debt in your 20s, the chances of you having a great retirement and riding off into the sunset in your 60s and 70s is much lower.
Yeah. And going back to opportunity costs,
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you are working into your 60s, 70s, and 80s, that means you're spending less time with family
Mm-hmm.
and grandkids and spouses. Like it's something that we want people to start thinking about now.
Right. And I know that, again, we're Christian people and the Lord, I am young and now I am old. Never have I seen the righteous forsaken nor his seed begging bread. Like we know that God promises to sustain us.
Yeah.
But think about the people in your church right now who are supposed to be living in retirement, who are well past retirement age and who are still reliant on a small income to survive.
Yeah.
Right. And there's opportunity cost too in what you're able to do at that point, right?
Yeah.
If you and your partner have dreams of, serving in ministries, of paying, building churches, of planting daughter works, of doing all these great things in the kingdom, it's a lot harder to do that
Yep.
when you can't make ends meet with a minister's salary.
Yeah.
Right. Debt is also something that burdens our ministry. It's something that burdens our Bible college graduates.
Yeah.
So apostolic people are not exempt from this rule. And the Bible, encourages us to be stewards of our finances.
Yeah.
It says that the Lord will sustain us and his seed won't beg bread, but it doesn't say that we're going to live comfortably or easily if we don't manage our finances well.
Yeah. What we as very privileged American considers sustained
Mm-hmm.
is a very different thing as sustaining us as like giving us what we need to survive.
Right.
There's a difference. We might not be happy with what is considered sustained.
Yeah, it can be a relatively low quality of life. And the
Yeah.
Bible even says the borrower is slave to the lender. Right?
Yeah. So I think I want to, and tell me if you want to say something. Do you have anything else you want to say first of all?
No, let me just summarize my point there.
Okay.
So the point we're trying to make, we're not trying to get everyone sad about their financial situation.
No.
We know that this is a difficult time. If we as matchmakers can prevent someone from beginning a marriage with a tremendous amount of debt,
Yeah.
we think that we should.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that we think that people have to have no debt in order to get married, right?
No, absolutely not.
We say you
That's
shouldn't.
almost impossible.
Right. We say you shouldn't carry more debt than 1 year's worth of your salary, which is a significant amount of debt for
Yeah.
most people,
Yeah.
right? So that's why there are so many challenges and costs that we feel like we could spare you from or help insulate you from to a small degree by not putting you into a partnership with someone who might be an amazing person, might be well aligned with you, might want a lot of the same things, but who needs to be somewhere where they can pay off debt. And if the two of you aren't going to have that opportunity together, then we're signing you up for a world of hurt.
Yeah. Well, and that's just what we would call a dating barrier,
Yeah.
right? Like if that is something that us trying to match you with someone who wants to have financial literacy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a goal and a plan and a retirement and change their family tree for the better. Like matching them with someone who does not disclose that they have $250,000 in non-mortgage debt would be a tragedy on our end
Mm-hmm.
as matchmakers.
Right.
Um, so I think that's part, and so of course we're not just going around disclosing, hey, by the way, this is Lisa and she has $250,000 in debt.
No.
We're not doing that, but it's one of those things that if we want to work with that person to make sure that they have a plan
Mm-hmm.
going forward. So that way, if we do match them with someone who says financial literacy is very, very important to me, we can, with talking to the person who has that debt, say, hey, is it okay if I disclose that you have a plan?
Right.
Then we can give someone a confidence, hey, we want to match you with someone that, they might have some debt, but they have a plan to pay it off. That way we can give you and that person the best chance to work together to move forward and getting to know each other.
Yeah. And what it looks like mechanically is if someone is carrying, we usually will be a little bit softer on people if it's a lot of student loan debt, especially if they're in a career where they have the potential to make a lot of money.
Yeah, if they say they're $300,000 in debt, but they also make $250,000 a year.
Right. Big hole, but a big shovel.
Big hole, big shovel. Yeah.
Right. That's a Dave term.
Yeah.
We're quoting a lot of Dave Ramsey terms here. But yeah, so we'll be kind of flexible on that.
Yeah.
But what I'll tell people is, hey, you carry so much debt, it is going to limit the pool of people that I can match you with.
Yeah.
Right. So if someone carries $300,000 in debt, I cannot match them in good conscience with someone who also carries $300,000 of debt. Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Generally speaking, if there's one person in the relationship that has a high amount of debt, I am looking for someone who does not have that same amount of debt to match them with. And I'll tell people that. I'll say, I don't feel like I can reasonably put you in a relationship with someone who is going to carry a similar amount of debt. And that means that your matches are going to be restricted.
Yeah.
And I give people the heads up about that. Right. And, I don't want to paint with a broad brush. There's flexibility there. There's, if they have a high income, if they're working it down, if they've already paid off a lot of debt, we'll have that conversation.
Yeah.
But it's important to us that we don't set people up for failure.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of the equation.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what advice we do give to people if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my goodness, I carry a lot of debt right now. And it feels like it's like a nail in the coffin of your dating life. Like, we don't want to leave you hopeless.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it is possible, even in an economy like this one, with all of its challenges, it is possible to get out of debt. It is possible to start to build savings. We're not going to tell you that it's easy because it's not easy right now. It never has been easy, right?
Yeah.
But it is possible. So what are our favorite things to refer people to?
So I'm going to start out by saying the Total Money Makeover.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you a caveat because I've heard people say, oh, Dave is a radical or Dave is a crazy Christian. Dave is a little crazy and he is a self-proclaimed little crazy.
Yeah. He's a curmudgeonly uncle.
Yeah. He's very passionate and he's also helped millions of people get out of debt.
Yeah.
So there is a method to his madness.
There is.
So that being said, there are people that are a little opposed to his views because he said he does not believe in credit cards at all.
He believes that you should carry no debt.
Yeah, no debt, no non-mortgage debt.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, so if you were able to follow Dave Ramsey's plan to a T, you would eventually pay off all of your debt and your credit score would disappear.
Yeah, be zero.
Right, because credit score is based on your success in paying on debt on time.
Yeah.
So having a high credit score means that you are a very reliable payer offer of debt,
Yeah.
right? And that's okay. But in our day and age, telling people that the goal is to have no credit score is very nerve wracking for a lot of people.
Yeah. So, um, I think the beauty behind Dave and the Total Money Makeover and Ramsey Solutions, which is the company that produces a lot of educational material, is that he gives you a language of how to communicate about money.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're with a spouse, especially if you're married,
Yeah.
and you don't have a foundation. Like me and you, even though we both had Dave Ramsey like already in the back of our minds,
Mm-hmm.
we still had very different upbringings,
Yeah.
very different views of money,
Different priorities around
different
what.
priorities, different expectations.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a common language to say, even though we had a different upbringing, here's where we can meet in the middle and have this conversation.
Yeah.
A lot of people are taught by their parents
Mm-hmm.
of how to deal with money. But you, me, you, and everyone watching this knows that not every parent is good with money.
Yeah.
Um, and so saying that, like having that as your only example, schools don't teach you how to take care of money.
Right.
And so who's going to teach you? And so basically what the reason why I love it is it gives people a common language.
Yeah.
And it also gives you a goal,
Mm-hmm.
where to start. Because I think, for instance, with me, I almost view it like working out. Like if you've never worked out a day in your life, if you go walk into like a big name brand gym, you're going to be really overwhelmed really quick. You're going to see 75 different machines. You're going to
Right.
see 200 different weight styles. You're going to see pull-up bars. You're going to see exercise balls. And if you've never worked out a day in your life,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be terrified.
Yeah.
But if you have someone walk you through and say, hey, it's not that complicated,
Mm-hmm.
you know, eat less than you burn and work your body, work your heart,
Mm-hmm.
you know, work a little bit of each muscle group and you'll be making progress. That's a baseline.
Right.
It makes it less intimidating. And then as you get further into your workout, if you want to stay on the same analogy, you then learn how to grow in different areas as you become more knowledgeable about it.
Right.
I feel like Dave Ramsey and Financial Peace is a good baseline to say here's where to start
Mm-hmm.
of your debt freedom journey.
I'm going to define a few things because we've thrown out like 6 or 7 different flavors. The thing about Dave Ramsey's platform is that there's something for everyone in terms of how you learn, right?
Yeah.
The Total Money Makeover is a book.
Yeah.
You can listen to it on audiobook. You can read the physical book. It's great either way.
I've listened to the audiobook several times. She's read the book multiple times.
Right. So there's also, he has lots of other books, but that's the one you want to start with. There's the Dave Ramsey Show, which is a podcast
Yes.
and a radio show that's been running for,
very encouraging.
yeah, it's been running for 20 something years. And he talks to people who call in about money questions. You can watch it on YouTube. You can go listen to the podcast. You can go tune in probably on some radio station somewhere. It's very accessible and they put up new episodes every day. It's now Dave and lots of other personalities talking about money that he's
they're
sort
called
of,
Ramsey personalities.
right, that he's like kind of collected. He's nearing retirement, so
Yeah.
he's diversified a little bit. Financial Peace University, you've heard us talk about that. That is a course.
For short, that's called, you will hear people call it FPU.
Right. It is a 9-week, I believe, course that you can take. And if you go on Ramsey.com, you can look up a FPU course near you. A lot of churches offer them because FPU and Dave Ramsey's plan in general has a scriptural basis to it. Non-Christians utilize it as well, but he is a Christian.
He is not apostolic, but he is a
he's a
devout
born again Christian,
Yeah.
right? And he, he is open about that in his work. So a lot of churches will host FPU classes.
Yeah, you do not have to be members of those churches to go to those classes either.
So you can look up information about who's offering a course in your area. They also sometimes do virtual courses. I wouldn't really recommend that because I think the in-person part is really important. But basically,
the in-person is great.
Yeah, it is a community focused course where you go and you sit with a group of people. It's very structured. It gives you a clear plan. You go through those 9 weeks, and by the end of it, you know how to budget your money and how to create a plan for yourself so you are able to live on less than you make. That's the main idea.
Yep.
And that way you can start the process of paying off debt, and it gives you a plan on how to do that. I'm not going to go into the details of
No,
that.
no.
But my point is, all of those things, you're going to get the same message from all three of those things, from the book,
Yeah.
from the podcast, or from the course. But I would recommend, if you are a person who is dealing with a significant amount of debt, get all of them, right?
Yeah.
Get the book, start listening to the podcast tomorrow, and sign up for a class. It will be well worth your time and investment to do that. And you can absolutely change the trajectory of your marriage and your
Yeah.
future by implementing a plan now.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to pay off every cent of your debt before you get married. But the more of a plan you have, and the more you have language around it, FPU specifically is really geared toward couples.
Yeah.
So if you're you can take it as a single person for sure, but if you're in a relationship that you think is leading to marriage, or if you're engaged, or if you are already married, you should take the class with your partner.
Yeah.
And it's really set up to help support couples to focus on paying off debt together and to give you all that language that you need.
Yeah. It is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to shout out the podcast again,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you do have a copious amount of debt.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might feel very alone after listening to this podcast, and that's not our goal.
Yeah.
Of like, oh my gosh, I have so much debt. What am I going to do? Am I going to be single forever? But you're going to listen to the podcast, and you're going to hear literally hundreds of people that call in with questions about their current state of their journey. But then every podcast episode, they have what's called a debt-free scream.
Mm-hmm.
And I have cried listening to so many of those debt-free screams just because of how beautiful you hear their journey. They have a small time on the podcast to be able to give an example or an explanation of their journey of where they started and where they're at now.
For context, the scream part, which sounds very scary if you've never heard this podcast, is after they've given more or less their testimony of paying off debt, they scream, "We're debt free."
Yeah, we're debt free
on the radio.
I'm debt free. And it's really beautiful because you have some people that come in there with millions of dollars in debt. You have people that have low income that also had massive amounts of debt, and you just hear how they had to work so hard to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just really motivational, and it's really encouraging, and it's all founded in scripture.
I will say, Dave Ramsey, we're referring to him because we have tried and tested what he puts out. And I think that you should approach any sort of program with a healthy grain of salt, and you should approach it with some skepticism and talk to your leadership about it, talk to your pastor about it. We like his stuff. We know that it works. There are other programs out there that are similar, right? What you want to avoid doing, and this is especially important if you are someone who enjoys listening to like hacks, right?
Yeah.
And
the
trying,
magic pill, their silver bullet.
right. It's the person who's going to tell you to buy this and sell it really quickly, or flip this around, or get into this,
or debt consolidation.
Right. You should not be taking money advice from someone who's been giving it for less than a decade.
Yes.
Right. Like, and I think that it's really important to know that like the person that you're taking advice from has a long history of saying the same thing. You can go back and listen to Dave's radio show from 15 years ago, and it's the same message as you're going to get today. That's important to have, because the money game is a long one, right? Like, it's not about paying off debt now so you can flip it into some kind of scheme later and make a bunch of money. It's incrementally getting yourself into a state of health with your finances and incrementally building savings so that you're secure in the future.
Yeah.
It is a long road.
Well, and it's every financial decision you make, whether you're married or single, you kind of hold to the light of your values in money and help you say, is this a wise choice?
Yeah.
I'm going to give a quick example of something that we've done in our marriage that I feel like has been one of the most challenging choices in our marriage, but one of the choices that we have made that I'm the most grateful for. And that is this house that we are in. Megan and I have worked really hard from the beginning of our marriage to get out of debt. And we have gotten out of debt, non-mortgage debt, and we have been very content to not go back into debt.
Yeah.
So us buying a house was a big decision. And when we were shopping for houses, it was like early 2020, mid 2020.
Yeah. So the market thank God,
Yeah,
hadn't
it
really
hadn't
shot
spiked.
off yet.
It hadn't spiked yet. And the mortgage, the interest rates were like 2.3%. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, we qualified at that time for a $400,000 loan.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be lying if I said I wasn't tempted to look at that 250 range,
Sure.
even though did not have the down payment for that.
Mm-hmm.
But like it was tempting, right? Like my sister once said, when you're buying and looking at a car, one, always pay for it in cash because you don't owe anything.
Right.
It is yours. You don't have to make a payment and then extra money can go to savings. But also, when you're buying a new car, you're buying a lot of bells and whistles.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with a brand new house. You're buying a lot of bells and whistles that you're being promised.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, a house is a house is a house as long as it's safe. And so you and I looked around. We looked at $150,000 houses. We played around with the idea of 250,
Mm-hmm.
300, and we're like, every time we went to the higher part of that range, because our values were in alignment,
Yeah.
we always got uncomfortable. We got uncomfortable in our gut and our soul, basically,
Because
about those really high ones.
that meant years of our life carrying that debt. That meant years and years and years of us carrying that big mortgage payment.
Yeah.
And we have dreams about how we want to spend our 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
our values was going to be ultimately our kids. When we were buying this house, when we were looking to buy, we had what was she, like 3-4 months old?
No,
No,
she was
a little
she was
older than
about 10 months old
that.
when
Yeah,
we bought
when
the
we
house.
bought the house. But when
Yeah.
we were looking around, she was probably less than 6 months old.
Yeah, I remember us traipsing around through the woods looking at properties with her in a baby carrier.
Yeah, that was funny, when just making sure she didn't have ticks afterwards.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things we were kind of going through our values of saying
Mm-hmm.
what's important to us.
Yeah.
And what our values is securing our children's future.
Yeah.
And that really is what we kept on coming back to. So, long story short, we ended up having an opportunity to buy a house from a family friend.
Yeah, an old family home.
Yeah, and it is a 3-2 with it's like 900 square feet
On a good day.
on a good day. It's on like a third of or a half an acre or something like that. And we got an opportunity to buy it for like $68,000 or something like that.
It was a steal. And it was a steal because
it was built in the 50s.
And it needed
And it
work.
had not been updated since maybe the 70s.
Yeah. It still had the 1970s green cartoon
like
frogs,
wallpaper and like nasty carpet and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those things that on the outside and on the inside, it did not look like a wise or comfortable decision.
It was not a comfortable decision
at all. But we said we have a house and a little bit of land for $68,000 when we could have bought something for $300,000.
Right.
And so as a result of that, we've since remodeled. God blessed us. We were able to do a good portion of remodels. It is healthy. It is safe. It's not cute or beautiful, but it is safe and good for our kids.
Yeah.
We
don't host a lot of dinner parties.
Yeah. And so that's something that we're working towards. But one of the things is now that we're doing synchrony, I think it's cool that we're doing a full circle, right? It got to a point where life got expensive.
Yeah.
Childcare was expensive. School, daycare is
Tuition,
expensive.
Yeah.
We were both working and paying for daycare and childcare, and we were still like, we had a couple $100 at the end of each month going to our savings.
Right.
And that's with only a $500 and something mortgage.
Yeah, we have an insanely low mortgage payment.
We have a $500 and something mortgage.
Right.
I want you to know that most people nowadays have at least a $1,500 mortgage.
Yeah. So the fact that what it gave us, despite the discomfort and despite the kind of like embarrassing quality of our house, right? Because it is a little embarrassing.
Oh, sure.
It's not something where we feel like we can bring people over a lot, or Our home is not a beautiful one,
Yeah,
you know.
it's not something that I I'm not proud of it because of its beauty. I am proud of it because of the decision we made though.
Right. What that decision gave us
Yeah.
was the opportunity to bring one of us home,
Yeah, bring me home from work.
and it gave us the opportunity to pursue something like synchrony.
Yeah, we would not be. I thought about this the other day.
Mhm.
We would not be able to be doing synchrony right now, and me a stay-at-home dad if we had any other house.
No, because if we were carrying more debt than we were carrying, number one, that stressor would put us over the edge, but we'd be paying for it in our time
Yeah.
and in our resources. So the takeaway here, we're not trying to set ourselves on a moral high horse here or
No, 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 no.
tell everyone to go live in a scary fixer upper.
But it's going back to opportunity cost.
Yeah, you choose when you marry someone and you pick the kind of life you want to live together. You choose how your money is going to pay for your time, basically.
Yeah.
You get to pick where the two of you spend your time as a couple. And again, if you're blessed enough to spend 60 years together,
Yeah.
right? What portion of that time do you want to spend working out of your home, away from your children, away from each other, versus how much time do you want to spend taking family vacations and spending time in your home together and relaxing with each other and enjoying each other and enjoying retirement and seeing and blessing the generations that come after you.
Yeah.
Where you put your money is an investment of where you plan to have your time.
Yeah.
And if you are marrying someone because you want to share a life with them, you get to pick before you get married what that life is going to consist of. And
Yeah.
there's always surprises, right? We don't know what tomorrow holds.
We are not the same people today
Mhm.
as we were when we got married.
No, but I am confident that you and I are going to be able to do things like, God willing, have a retirement where we don't have to work when
Yeah.
we're in our late 60s,
Yeah.
where we can be the grandparents that are present for our grandkids, and we can
Yeah.
be the pillar saints of the church who are there every time the doors are open, who are,
Yeah.
the people that you think of as being the ones that are driving everything. It takes time to be those people. So I feel like we could spend 1,000 years on this because we're both very passionate about
Yeah.
it. And there's so many tangents we could go down and so many stories we could tell. What I want, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I have to say one more thing.
Okay.
We want to put couples together that are able to be impactful for the kingdom of God.
Mm.
And obviously, if you come to us and say, I want to use your services, we will try our best to work with what we got.
Yeah.
That being said, if you have a couple who are super passionate about diving deep into ministry and loving people, and there is let's just again throw a massive number of debt over their head, let's say the 250, 300,000 over their head, they have to spend how many hours together working to get rid of that, and hopefully not going into more debt during that process,
Right.
to then start building their wealth and thinking about their future before they can start using that same finance, the same money that's going into their bank account and reinvesting it into the kingdom.
Yeah.
You and I want to give more money to the kingdom. And and I don't want you guys to hear this as us trying to gloat or something like trying to us be braggadocious, but any way, shape, or form. But Megan and I have a heart to have a savings account one day, that if there is a lady in the church who needs a new fixer-upper car to just get her and the single mom and her kids to church, that we could afford to say, let's do that, even anonymously, like that.
Right.
Let's do that. We can't do that right now, but that's a goal of ours one day, is to have money off to the side to be able to give to people. But if we keep on going into more debt, that isn't possible.
Right. Your generosity is limited by your debt.
Yeah.
We did a thing. So Steve and I talked about how we've been FPU coordinators before, which is when we host the class for our church and we are the ones that kind of like run the lessons, right? And as part of that, we had a representative from Ramsey Solutions who was in communication with us and asking some questions about our church to understand the needs of the church and how they could best serve us. And he asked for some numbers about like our church population, where we lived. And he said, okay, if your church is full of average people, right, making average salaries, carrying average amount of debt, based on the numbers that you gave me, there is $4 million in debt sitting on your church pew.
Mind you, at the time, I think we had 400 saints.
Maybe. But the point there was that that's how much money.
$4 million in debt out of 400 saints.
Right.
And that's probably including children too. So.
Yeah. That
like,
think about the number of missionaries that would support.
Yeah.
Think about the church that could build, right? So there's a tremendous amount of cost to that enslavement to debt.
The borrower is slave to the lender.
Right. So the overarching goal of Synchrony, the reason why this ties in so much to our heartbeat, is that beyond just getting people out of singleness and making people happy and putting them in marriages, the goal of Synchrony is to build strong kingdom marriages that contribute to kingdom families, that contribute to a strong church that changes the world.
Yeah.
Right. That is the ultimate goal. Money and money problems prevent that.
Yeah.
It's another major blocker.
It is a massive portion of your marriage.
Yeah.
And we want to try to start a marriage off in the very beginning on the right foot.
Right.
If possible.
Yes. Okay, we have to stop.
Yeah, we're sorry, y'all. If you're hating this, I'm sorry.
They can always pause.
That's true. Or stop listening.
Right.
I do have to fulfill the promise of what not to do of the story.
Okay.
Okay. So, gentlemen, ladies, do not do what I did. So, in this conversation about passion and debt freedom, when I was younger, I was a lot more naive about the world and debt, because I was able
and a little more arrogant.
Sure. Maybe. Because I was fortunate enough to be able to have a sister to teach me about not going into debt and being married to Megan without any debt, I had a little bit of an exalted mindset. And so when we got married and she had her car loan and she had her student loans and stuff like that.
I had $16,000.
And it really wasn't that much in all,
Right.
to be all things considered. I remember very jokingly, I was not saying this in any way, shape, or form trying to hurt you by any means necessary. Sorry, I don't know if I said that right. I was not trying to hurt you.
Mm.
But what happened was I was in a conversation, and as guys do, is you kind of like do like the woe is my wife kind of trope, right? That guys end up doing, which I don't believe you should do, but I got stuck in that cycle for a little while.
You were talking to an older male family member and you wanted them to respect you as a grown man.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And I ended up saying, I married debt.
Yeah.
As I remember that was me trying to say I had no debt and I ended up marrying into debt.
Right.
Looking back, holy smokes, that was a bad choice.
Right.
And also it really hurt you too, especially because at the time you made way more money than I did, and you were making the biggest, if there was such a thing as contribution separately, you were making more contribution to paying off the debt than I was at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things. It was very arrogant, and I want to say I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But when you get married, that should not be your mindset. Is like that is your debt, and I have no debt.
Mm.
And I am doing the altruistic thing of paying off your debt with my measly income.
Yeah, this is a good cautionary tale to the people who are listening who aren't carrying debt.
Yeah.
We can't get holier than thou.
No, absolutely not. And I can see that being a temptation. And so I was laughing earlier in the episode because I was realizing how much of an idiot I was at that point in our life. And it was like our first year of marriage.
Yes.
And so please don't do that.
Yes, that is one of several times that the inside of Stephen's mouth tasted remarkably of foot. Anyway, before we hang up.
Yep.
Hang up.
Hang up.
You know that now people.
I know people go like this
Boop.
instead of like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. The millennials are all
Yeah.
like,
Flip phone.
yeah, boop. Um, so before we get off of this topic, a couple of quick announcements. Number one, you can still sign up for the Singles at Sea cruise.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to sign up all the way up until January of next year, but we want you to be thinking about it now because remember, you only need $200 per cabin to reserve it. That's all you have to pay up front. And then you can pay the remaining balance of the cruise in increments between now and January.
Yeah.
So if you are, the cruise goes out in February, you can pay up to the month right before. If you are the type of person who, is on a budget and wants to make sure that you stay within certain budgetary restrictions, this is a great way to do that. So if you're looking to take a vacation and you want to go hang out with a bunch of apostolic singles and get to mingle with people and not have to think about food or reservations or travel expenses outside of getting there and getting on the boat, this is a great way to do that. So our travel agent, Chelsea, has her contact information down in the description. You can call her to get pricing details and to actually put in your reservation, and we'd love to have you.
Yep.
Second announcement. If you are listening to this, I guess Easter week, this will drop.
Oh, yeah.
This will drop the day after Easter. Happy Easter.
Yeah. Merry Easter.
Merry Easter. He is risen, and I hope you got some discount Reese's peanut butter eggs.
That's right.
The next 10 days are going to be a time of dedicated prayer for us. Steve and I have had it on our hearts that we need to just spend some time in consecrated prayer about our singles.
Yeah.
We try to approach the work we do prayerfully, but we just feel like we've been battling some things in the spirit around this, and it's time for us to kind of buckle down.
Yeah.
So we'd love to invite you to come along with us on that. If you follow us on social media, we'll be posting about a theme for each day of these 10 days, starting on Monday right after Easter and going through the end of April. So you're welcome to hop in and join us on that. If you want to join with us in prayer, if you are a community member, within the community, there's access to a prayer call that we're going to be doing later in the evening. You're welcome to you're welcome to join that with us. And really what we just want to do is, put our focus on the spiritual roots of some of these things that our singles are fighting.
Yep.
And really speak directly at those. So.
That's right. I'm very excited for the prayer. I don't want you to think that I'm not, but this is a very long episode and we're going to have like 3 people hear this announcement.
That's fine. It'll be on social media too. I love you.
I love you too.
I love that you are so passionate about debt freedom.
I am. Yes, it's more people need to hear it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a great week.
Happy Easter.